Oh my God, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do when we come for you? White boy, white boy, white boy. What boy what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do when we come for you? Why oh, why oh?
As unjustified and not the act of a friend. Political
Wait a minute, take a minute, wait a minute. This unjustified Australian government response to Trump's steel tariff. Oh, the steel.
reporter Evelyn Manfield has the details from Canberra.
Some strong language in.
Australia's Trade Minister has hit back at US President Donald Trump's plan to increase tariffs on steel imports as unjustified and not the act of a friend. Political reporter Evelyn Manfield has the details from Canberra.
Some strong language in a statement from the Trade Minister, Don Farrell, a little earlier today, as you say, calling it unjustified and not the act of a friend. We should be able to show you his words on the screen now. He says that this is an act of economic self-harm that will only hurt consumers and businesses who rely on free and fair trade. We will continue to engage and advocate strongly for the removal of these tariffs. So look, similar language to what we saw Trade Minister Don Farrell and the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese use earlier in the year when the United States did put this 25% tariff on steel and aluminium imports in the first place. Is concerning for Australian jobs. The coalition doesn't agree with this policy, the removal of these tariffs. So look, similar language to what we saw Trade Minister Don Farrell and the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese use earlier in the year when the United States did put this 25% tariff on steel and aluminium imports in the first place. You might remember the Prime Minister said this wasn't in the spirit of the friendship between the two nations, of course, reflecting on that long-standing friendship between the US and Australia. We have also had a response from the opposition this morning. Shadow Trade Minister Kevin Hogan has released a statement as well, which we should be able to show you. He says that this is concerning for Australian jobs. The coalition doesn't agree with this policy. The Albanese government needs to double its efforts to protect our steel industry and local jobs for steel workers. And also a mention there from Kevin Hogan that he is hoping that the Prime Minister can have a face-to-face meeting with Donald Trump too, because as we know, many people have reflected on how President Trump sort of likes to have those face-to-face interactions with someone else. Of course, we do know that Anthony Albanese has had a number of phone calls with him. Now, just for some extra context, we have heard from an economist based in Michigan on the program not too long ago, saying that he actually thinks this will have a remarkably small impact on the steel industry here in Australia, just because the United States isn't a big market.
And Evelyn, what has the US president had to say about why he's decided to do this, and particularly now?
Yes, so the president has made this announcement at a rally in front of steelworkers. So his message is very much, unsurprisingly, make America great again, and is saying that this is a good move for steelworkers in the United States. We've got some of his remarks from the rally.
A 25% increase. We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America, which will even further secure the steel industry in the United States. Nobody's going to get around that.
So the message there from the president that this is wonderful for workers. He's also since posted on social media site Truth Social saying that it will take effect on Wednesday. But of course, there is already concern flowing in that ultimately this could just push up the price of metals used for things like manufacturing vehicles and also building homes.
Evelyn Manfield reporting there, and Justin Wolfers is a professor of public policy and economics at the University of Michigan. He says whilst these tariffs won't have a significant effect on America's production of steel, it raises broader questions about the stability of the US's trade agenda.
The US is not a huge producer of steel. It's accounts for about 4% of global production. America actually consumes a little more than that, so is an importer of steel. The important thing to understand is a fundamental mistake at the heart of all of this. Steel is a tiny sliver of the output of the American economy, but it's used as an input in a whole lot of other parts of the American economy. Lots of things use steel as an input. And so you might get a little bit of expansion of this tiny sector, but in exchange, you're going to have much higher costs for the rest of the economy. And so Trump actually tried steel tariffs back in 2018, and by one estimate, those steel tariffs saved 1,000 jobs in steel manufacturing, but the higher costs that were passed on cost 75,000 jobs elsewhere in the economy. I think what's really unsettling to people over here isn't just that what's happening to steel, it's actually the broader chaotic process. If on a Friday afternoon, while you happen to be visiting a steel plant, you just flick out, what the heck, we'll do 50% tariffs on steel, then it kind of makes you wonder, where's the bloke visiting next week? The steel tariffs are a mistake. They're going to cost the United States jobs. They're going to make things more expensive for people over here. The small number of people it helps really is so small that it's probably going to cost about $1 million per job saved. And the bigger problem is what comes next.
US President Donald Trump has announced he plans to double tariffs on steel to 50%. Now, this is just breaking this morning. The move would see a 25% increase on the already existing 25% tariff, so that makes it a total of 50%. This latest move by the president is his bid to ratchet up that pressure on global steel producers, and it's a move which, I should say, followed through, will deepen his trade war. He made the announcement at a steel workers rally in the state of Pennsylvania.
A 25% increase. We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America, which will even further secure the steel industry in the United States. Nobody's going to get around that.
North America correspondent Carrington Clark joins us now. Carrington, we know that announcement has just been made. Do you have any other details on this?
Yeah, so Donald Trump has had a big week when it comes to tariff battles. We've seen a court at one point knocking down his ability under certain emergency powers to levy the tariffs that we saw, the so-called reciprocal tariffs on specific countries. Now, the 25% tariff on steel and aluminium was not affected by that judgment, which I should point out has been stayed. But what he is saying today is that he is going to double the 25% that's already in place up to 50%, which he says will protect the industry further, effectively blocking any imported steel from coming into the United States. The reason he's in Pennsylvania is because he was announcing what he is calling an investment from Nippon Steel into US Steel. This has been a controversial business transaction. The takeover of US Steel by Nippon was blocked by former President Joe Biden on national security concerns, and that seemed to be a shared value with Donald Trump. He also seemed concerned previously when campaigning about any such takeover. Now, he is saying that this is just an investment, and the announcement of the doubling of this tariff would indicate that he believes that that will be enough to ensure the future of the US steel industry. But it is hard to keep up with the rate at which the tariffs on different sectors, on different products, and on different countries are so rapidly changing. I would say it does appear that steel is an industry that Donald Trump has a strong belief should be protected from foreign competition. This has been a through line both in his first term and in his second term. And one of the architects of Trump's tariff policies, Peter Navarro, has close ties with the steel industry. So in some ways, this isn't a surprise, but it will obviously be worrying to those countries that rely on America as a market for their own steel products. And I would think particularly of concern for Canada, who is the number one exporter of steel into the US market. But this is an extraordinarily high number. At some point, the tariff becomes so big that you effectively block any competition from external actors. And that's the kind of rate of a 50%. I think we're basically there. But this is consistent with a lot of what Donald Trump says, but again, be mindful that he has shown a propensity in recent months to shift on a dime when it comes to tariffs, and it's hard to know at this point whether or not this is a thought bubble, whether or not it's a negotiation tactic, or whether or not this will be imposed.
And Carrington, this announcement comes amid a court battle, as you mentioned a little earlier there, over the legality of some of Trump's global tariffs. Do we know where that court battle lies now?
So what we saw was a court particularly targeting, as I said, the reciprocal tariffs. These are and the universal tariff. These were Donald Trump taking steps under certain emergency powers to levy tariffs on all nations. Now, a particular court found that was unlawful, that the president didn't possess that power to declare that to be emergency and then use a tariff to deal with what he is calling an economic emergency. But the tariffs on steel and aluminium and the so-called fentanyl tariffs, which were tariffs that were imposed the steel and aluminium tariffs have come under a different part of the president's power. So they weren't in question on that particular court case. But there are so many court cases currently in action here in the United States. The court system has proven to be the major foil to Donald Trump's powers, and many of them are still working through the court process to see whether or not they will be able to stand. But on the reciprocal and the country-specific tariffs, they are still in effect because the Court of Appeals, the Federal Court of Appeals, has allowed them to stay in effect while the appeals process goes forward. But again, it's hard to know with Donald Trump whether or not these are negotiating tactics or whether or not he plans to keep them in place for an extended period of time, knowing, of course, that by keeping large tariffs in place, it forces up the cost for importers and it forces up the cost of the end consumer here in the United States.
As you say, Carrington, it's hard to keep up with what's coming out of the Oval Office these days. But Carrington Clark there, reporting from Washington. Thank you.
No shortage of material at the moment. It's been a great pleasure unpicking this week's events, and I'll let you do the honours.
Thank you, Mike, and we must say thank you to Australian politics for continuing to deliver. Spearsy, back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Limo. Thank you, Mike. Now, just before we hear some final observations, on last week's program, there was a suggestion two Nationals MPs had left their electorates during the floods in New South Wales. Alison Penfold and Pat Conahan were in fact in their electorates helping their communities. We apologise for the error. It's always important to admit when you've got something wrong. All right, let's get some final observations. Claire.
I'm going to heap on the embarrassment just quickly and thank Laura for blazing a trail through the gallery for a lot of young women like myself that have followed in the years since. But in terms of observations, this one's a bit inside baseball, but the government is still hashing out its staffing allocations. This is something that starts at the Prime Ministerial level, goes through to the Minister's offices, to the opposition and then the crossbench. It means a lot of really hardworking people are in limbo at the moment, as always happens in a new term. But given how slow it seems to be going this time, there's a real danger for the government here that if they don't get on with things and start governing, feed the beast or the beast will feed on you.
Yeah, no one think of the staff. Jason.
Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, has been talking a lot about productivity since the election, and I think he's getting ready to deliver a major address on that subject at the National Press Club in about 2 weeks from now. So it'll be interesting to see how he fleshes out that argument around the need to lift productivity. So that's coming up.
Laura.
On indulgence, Mr. Speaker, I feel like I've had more farewells than Nellie Melba this week. I'm leaving the gallery. It's been a really long time, but I think I'm leaving it in really good hands. There are so many really great young journos in the gallery, and all I would say is, as I said in my column this week, the government's got a once in a generation opportunity, not just because of the numbers, but because of the state of demise of the minor parties, in which I'd include the coalition at the moment, and just go for it on policy. People want to know, people want to understand, and people want to be informed on the details of policy. And the gallery is still the best place to do that and to quiz the government. So go for it.
Oh, we're going to miss you enormously from the gallery, Laura, and an enormous thank you for your huge contribution to political journalism. But we will see you back on this couch in your new role as Global Affairs Editor at the ABC, which is going to be fascinating as well. Can't wait to see what you do with it. Thank you all very much for joining us this morning. Finally, we were reluctant to show Michael McCormack's most embarrassing moment yet again, but then he raised it himself, reflecting on his time as the Shadow Minister for International Development in the Pacific as he moved to the backbench. We'll leave you with this life lesson for visits to the Pacific. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, there was that little incident of Sakawa in the Federated States of Micronesia. I've learnt my lesson. Just sit, don't gulp.
You're making us all feel very excited about being here.
The Panthers celebrate. Edge taken. Daniels for three. Goes off.
That is unbelievable.
The Brisbane Lions never stop believing.
And she's got it. What a set of tennis. Hello and welcome to Offsiders. Melbourne City went into last night's A-League decider as solid favourites. But hanging over their heads was a poor recent record in grand finals and a hungry crosstown rival in Melbourne Victory. The decisive moment came just 10 minutes into the match.
The ball up the other end, but no, the whistle goes, and Melbourne
Good morning and welcome to Offsiders. It's a pleasure to have your company. It's a pleasure to have the company of our panel. I'm joined by Ryan Hoffman, Priyanka Chatfield and Bruce Gitte. Bruce, we'll start with you. Usually the bridesmaids, not last night, Melbourne City. They got it done.
They absolutely did, and despite Melbourne Victory's stronger start, Melbourne City went up the other end and scored that decisive goal through Jonathan Cohen. Really happy for the coach, Aurelio Vidmar, who has coached in a grand final before, losing to Melbourne Victory when he was coaching Adelaide United, and their football director, Michael Petrillo, has done a phenomenal job at that club, not just in recruiting and building strong squads, but also instilling a really great culture.
And what a crowd as well. Melbourne really came out to support this derby. The biggest crowd ever, is that right, that Amy Stadium has ever had?
Biggest crowd ever at Amy Stadium, and so important for the A-League. I think to have this spectacle for this competition this year was really, really crucial. And, it wasn't the most exciting, flamboyant,
It wasn't a showpiece.
It wasn't a showpiece in terms of the football. It was a real sort of arm wrestle, a bit more cagey. But great scenes, great crowd, huge win for the league, I think.
Do you think with the Melbourne Victory having such an amazing victory, pardon the pun, last week against Auckland, do you think their grand final was played the week before? Because Auckland, the runaway leaders throughout the whole competition, do you think they played their game a week early?
Yeah, maybe. I think with Victory's squad, their firepower up front's always been phenomenal, so you can never write them off. But they lost Valupale last week to injury. That was a huge out for them. And like their coach said after the game, they just came up short on the night. And that's the thing in finals. You never know what can happen. And it didn't happen for Melbourne Victory last night.
And big players tend to step up in these big games. And Matthew Leckie has been such a massive name in Australian football for so long, and he just proved it again last night.
Absolute machine. I mean, physically, he's unbelievable. He's had a lot of injuries this season, but he came up big in the grand final, both defensively, as you see there. He had a great header. This is a great save by the keeper, but he played in a number 6 position as a defensive midfielder last night. Very different. He's normally playing out wide on the wing and attacking. But he really was the engine room for that Melbourne City team last night, and he went into battle, didn't he? Getting studded in the face, probably has a broken nose.
What photos? I was about to say the scene.
It's a great grand final photos.
I mean, we don't like to liken sport to war, but he looks like he's absolutely been in the wars. No, but it was almost the perfect result for the A-League this season, isn't it? To have a team like Auckland FC come into the competition and be so dominant, but then to have that grand final at home in a market like Melbourne. It was really the perfect showpiece for them, and to see the crowd was fantastic.
I think if you're an administrator sitting in the head offices at the APL, phenomenal season in terms of the storylines that were written throughout the year. A debut club in Auckland, they go out, they win the minor premiership, they finish top, great crowds in Auckland, really growing the game there. But a grand final in Melbourne that ends up being a derby. I mean, that's sort of the dream, right? If you're an administrator, it's a Melbourne derby or a Sydney derby. Let's be brutally honest in terms of eyeballs, commerciality. They're the 2 biggest markets. That's where the biggest clubs are. So yeah, absolute win for the league.
And when we think about A-League, we often think about the dulcet tones of Simon Hill. He called his 16th A-League grand final last night, but is no longer is heading back to the UK after 20 years. So we just want to thank Simon for his service to the A-League. And he's, of course, one of our friends here at Offsiders.
Absolutely. Obviously, I know him personally very well. I don't think we can replace him. I'd go as far to say he's the voice of football in.
And the Saints lost Mateus Philippou to injury early before Christian Petrarca sparked a Demons fight.
Brisbane showers. Sydney will be partly cloudy. Canberra morning frost and partly cloudy.
The pussyfoot around, I think, is just not worth the effort.
Let's turn to Donald Trump yesterday.
An irreplaceable figure in the game, and certainly the voice of football in this country.
Yeah, we certainly wish him all the best. But moving on to the Matildas, and my goodness, there's a reason why they are the most popular team in Australia. They had a 2-0 win in the first of 2 friendlies against Argentina on Friday night. They were missing a host of stars, but they still managed to draw a crowd of 43,000 at Marvel Stadium.
It's a cracking crowd, and if there was ever any doubt that the Matildas were the jewel in Football Australia's crown, I think that was dispelled after the Women's World Cup. They just came out such a strong brand. But a good game, not their best game by no means, but it is a little bit of a glimpse into the future of the Matildas. They were missing so many, starters, key players, but to have Carly Johnson and Caitlin Torpey, who was maybe a little bit embarrassed by this shot, cross-come shot that ended up being a goal, but a really strong performance from the Matildas.
Sorry, Bianca. I was just going to say, I think the greatest thing is that we are seeing that next generation of Matildas coming through. We've got some fantastic players playing in Europe, winning Champions Leagues with Arsenal, but to see this next crew coming through puts it in really good stead.
Absolutely. There's a lot to be positive about for the Matildas. Expectations are obviously super high, as they should be, but when you've got over 43,000 coming to games, friendly games at that, more than what we saw at the A-League Grand Final, it just puts it into perspective.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the official pre-match press conference for the Commonwealth Matildas. We'll be taking on Argentina tomorrow night right here at GIO Stadium with kick-off at 7:30pm. Before we commence the official proceedings, as it is National Reconciliation Week, it only seems apt that we acknowledge the stories and the traditions and the living cultures of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples on the lands that we meet and gather and play on today here at GIO Stadium. To open the proceedings, I'm pleased to welcome the ACT Deputy Chief Minister and Minister for Sport, Yvette Berry.
Thanks very much. Well, welcome everyone. We are absolutely thrilled to welcome the Matildas and Argentina here to the ACT, to Canberra, to the nation's capital, and our community is completely overwhelmed and have already sold out the stadium within hours of the tickets going for sale. And it's something we're proud of here in the ACT. We support women's sport, we support equality, and we support opportunity. And we get behind our sports, particularly our women's sports, to give young people at the grassroots all the way up to our elite players the chance to play football for Australia. So we're expecting a amazing game. This stadium has seen an incredible amount of sport over the last little while. She has been with us for a while, but when she's full, if I can gender her, she sings. And so tomorrow night we will see an amazing game when the Matildas take on Argentina, hoping for a 2-from-2 against Argentina here in the ACT. And I know that Canberrans will be cheering loudly, and we absolutely welcome Argentina and Argentina fans as well to the game. But thank you all for coming along today.
Thank you very much, Minister. Well, the Commonwealth Matildas, it has been almost 3 years since they last played right here in Canberra. And for our interim head coach, it's a bit of a homecoming considering he spent 16 years living in Canberra. Tom, what's it like to be able to return for a really important build-up match for the Asian Cup?
Look, it's always fantastic to come back to Canberra, back to Bruce Stadium, where I almost ended my playing career back in the 80s, and wasn't quite as built up as it is now. So it's a fantastic venue for our game tomorrow night. But yeah, I always enjoy coming back to the national capital, and particularly where women's involved, because women's football in Canberra has been one of our strongest states, territories in the women's game. And Canberra United is a great flagship at domestic level, at the elite domestic level, and probably one of our most successful teams in the A-League Women's programme.
open up the floor to questions. Mel.
Tom, as you said, been in Canberra a while before this. How excited are you to see that it's a sellout and potentially maybe the biggest women's sport event in Canberra ever?
No, it's fantastic. I've come back into the Matildas job and it's just phenomenal. I still find it so amazing when I've walked out in most of our games into stadiums. So to come here tomorrow night and see it full, mostly with green and gold, and the type of support and the fanaticism almost of the people who come along and support the team is just amazing. So it'll be great to see the stadium filled tomorrow night.
I have to ask about our local player, Michelle Heyman. How's she been going with the squad under your tutelage then and in the coaching role? And how do you think she's going to go here in front of her home crowd?
Well, I've had a chat with her this morning and told her I'm expecting at least a goal. She's playing in front of her home crowd. She'll play tomorrow night at some stage in the game. That's 100% certain. And she's a terrific player. She's a player that's actually just got better and better as she's got more mature. And when you look now at her experience in and around the squad and her ability, she's so important for the team. She's critically important for women's football in Canberra, and she's one of our real stalwarts in the game.
I have to ask a bit too. Would you say this is the biggest women's sport event in Canberra ever?
Absolutely, and we're thrilled to have this opportunity. So looking forward to more chances like this. We're always having conversations in the background of how we can bring more content like this, particularly in women's content, to the ACT, and because we know that Canberrans love it. The crowds sell out and go wild. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Yvette, I guess when it comes to the Asian Cup next year, I guess is this sort of would you be hoping to host some more games here next year?
Look, as I said, we're always open to hosting international sport and particularly women's sport. We're always having conversations in the background with organisations, international organisations like Football Australia and others, to get this kind of content here, because it does give young people in the AC the chance to see what they could be one day. And it's thrilling for us to have somebody like Michelle Heyman, who is a real local here in the ACT and so well known, to be part of this international team and to show Canberrans her leadership and what it means to the game. It's just been outstanding to watch her. I think, as you said, she's just grown and grown into being an amazing human, but also an excellent player.
Yeah, I guess, Natasha, a question for you. I suppose, is this your first time playing in Canberra, and what's it like playing here in the capital?
No, actually, I had a small stint. I think I played about 2 or 3 games for Canberra United back in, I'm going to guess, maybe 2019. So I've experienced Canberra in its coldest and its hottest as well in summer. But I've only really got good memories back in Canberra. So I think, how close everything is proximity-wise. It's 20 minutes from side to side of the city, and I think that kind of speaks to how close the community is as well. I remember just in those few games that I was playing in, playing at McKellar Park, it was always kind of a sellout, and I think that's kind of a testament to the community. And tomorrow, a sellout, so hopefully that energy is just, whatever it is, quadrupled or whatever the crowd is, so yeah.
And what do these 2 games mean? I guess these 2 games against Argentina, what does it mean in regards to the preparation for the Asian Cup next year?
Yeah, I think, a big key word that's been pushed around in camp is momentum. So, every game we're building towards that Asian Cup. And every camp, every game, every training session is just a step closer to that and a chance to get better as a team, as individuals. So yeah, I think it's just a really good opportunity to take that momentum into the Asian Cup. Yeah.
You say a thing or two about coming into your first camp and getting a goal in. What was it like to see Carly get her goal?
I don't know. I think maybe you could feel it as well, Tom. I felt like she was going to score kind of from the kickoff, and she nearly got 2, I think, as well. She hit one with the left foot. It was quite close. So I, honestly, just so happy for her. She looked so happy, and it's such a big thing, I guess, to come into camp to be able to score, and then I think she got player of the match as well. So I don't know how you could do much better. So yeah, just honestly so happy for her.
And Tom, ahead of your final game, do you have anything you kind of want to do differently this game?
Apart from win, no, I'll settle for that. Not really, for me it's since coming into the job that it's just really been important to try and keep everything stable, everything taken along so that, hopefully the new coach comes in can then really start to take the programme forward in the direction that he or she wants to take it in. So, no, for me it would just be business as normal, and I think we're in the situation with a squad where a lot of players are looking forward to Aussies Asian Cup, and there's a lot of competition for places in that final 23-player squad. So these games are important, as Natasha said, for us to continue hopefully a winning momentum, hopefully continuing to play better football, but at the same time they're important for individual players like Callie to come into the team and put pressure on other players for selection in the squad next year.
And since we're in Canberra, I have to ask you, Canberra United's had a very uncertain future in recent years, contrasted with this game being an immediate sellout. What do you think that means for women's sport in Canberra? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, I think it's a great indication that we need to keep Canberra United in the A-League women's competition. They have been, a founding club, particularly in the initial stages of the league. They were a dominant force in the league. They are, I would say, the best supported team in the competition, and I say that by both crowd size but also the passion for the crowd and the actual mix in the crowd. So when I come down here to games, I see a lot of people my age in the crowd, which is quite comforting, to be honest. But then there's a mix of obviously young girls and etc. etc. This is a critically important team in A-League women's football, and a critically important team for the development of football, because what we want to see is we want to see more players coming out of places like Canberra and going through the A-League women's and then coming into the international arena. So I will certainly make sure I do my best to make sure Canberra stay in the competition.
What does that mean?
What does what mean?
What does it mean? How will you try to do best?
Well, I will try and make sure that I use, if I have some influence, the people that are part of the decision-making process. I think I caused a little bit of controversy apparently recently just talking about the A-League women, and I intend to continue doing that to make sure that our competition stays vibrant, stays national, and that we have a team in it from Canberra.
Tash, leading into the Women's Asian Cup, this is now your fourth Combank Matildas camp. Another start. How important is it for you as a player to be getting those significant match minutes?
It's a good question. Like I said, I think it's just whether it's team momentum or individual momentum. I think it's, the more minutes you play, the more comfortable you get as a team and as an individual. It's still quite new to me playing in front of 40,000 people and sell-out crowds. So I think, the more minutes I get under my belt, the more comfortable I'm going to feel, and hopefully that's reflected on the field.
And Tash, coming into camp as well, you're seeing a lot of your international teammates play for different clubs and come back here. What do you think needs to change in the A-League to get to that level?
I think, from my perspective, I'd like the season to go a full year around, whether that's, training, just basically mirroring what's happening in Europe. So obviously that means maybe paying a bit more for the season to be full year round. And I guess it would be ideal to attract maybe overseas talent as well to make sure the quality of the league stays up to scratch as well.
Oh, that's the end. Finito, amigo. Finito. 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 That's the best. Finito. Matildas. They won, I think. 2-0 they won. Did they win? They won, didn't they? We don't need to show the game. They won. They won. Me. Hector.
Chavez, 27-year-old playing in Chile. Here's Grant. Still Grant. In the end, crosses it in for Johnson. Carly Johnson on international debut. The cutting edge the Matildas needed. And it is 21-year-old Carly Johnson breaking through to make it Australia 1, Argentina 0. Kennedy. Knocked out by McNamara. Torpy. Johnson wants to roll onto the left side. And the oohs and ahs around Marvel Stadium. Fans of the Ninja A-League would have seen Carly Johnson shoot from that range so many times in her career. Unfortunately, just couldn't put it in the net. One ball here. Immediate involvement for Heyman perhaps. Torpy. Well, it's floated in. Shock and surprise and delight for Caitlin Torpy. Almost apologetic, but the Matildas lead 2-0. Sayer moving it out to the right. Grant, a looping cross. It hits the woodwork. Argentina clear. Oh, they nearly got caught out by a cross shot in consecutive faces of play. And yet the attacking continues from Australia. Johnson, Wheeler. Claire Wheeler! Excellent save by Chavez. I'm not sure there would have been a more popular scorer in the stadium based on the game Claire Wheeler has had so far. Argentina under siege. Johnson receives the ball back to goal. Feeds it through the middle for Heyman. It's Michelle Heyman. And groans from the crowd as it rolls just wide to the right.
Just a little deft touch to release the run of Heyman was timed to perfection. What a performance Carly Johnson has had tonight. Her first, I'm sure, of many in the green and gold.
Okay, hola. Hola, 2-0 they won. You can do it. Okay, bye. I'm going to see you later into mi sector.